Hello, and welcome to Solving Endpoint Anywhere Together. Today's webinar is sponsored by Quest and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, we do have a few housekeeping items that will help you get the most out of this session. So first off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in our webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. That Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio or slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Now, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. I'd especially like to call your attention to a pair of links from Quest. There's one for a free 14-day trial and another to learn more about Quest Case. Also in there are a link to the Gorilla Guide Book Club, where you can get access to Actual Tech Media's great printed resources on technology topics, as well as a link to the ATM Event Center, which has our calendar of upcoming events. So I encourage you to access those resources now and share them with your friends and colleagues. Now, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $300 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for that prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Scroll to the bottom and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. Finally, one of the best benefits of an event like this is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenter. And so to help encourage those questions, to sort of shake them out of your fingers, we have a special additional prize for you. It's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. At the end of the event, we'll look at all the questions, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. And with that, let's get to today's fantastic content. So it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter today, Kent Fide, who's a Senior Director of Product Management at Quest. And Kent has more than 20 years of experience in the business of technology, which makes him a great guide for our discussion today about the challenges with our current Endpoint Anywhere reality. So let me bring Kent on screen. Hey, Kent, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. So take it away. I'm looking forward to this presentation.
All right, sounds good. Thanks. And good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's taken the time out of their day to join us. We really do appreciate that. You know, the fact is, we know that the IT industry is one that's busy, so we know that there's probably a million other things you could be doing. So hopefully you'll get value out of today's discussion. Today, I want to talk a little bit about solving Endpoint Anywhere together. You know, the fact is that our worlds have been largely flipped upside down over the last few years, especially in the IT industry, right? Overnight, we were really expected to adapt to change that really no one could have otherwise expected. And so, you know, today, what I want to do is not only talk a little bit about some of the solutions to these problems, but really set a foundation for some of the things that, you know, we here at Quest are doing from a market analysis, you know, kind of a research perspective, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, when I think about how to solve Endpoint Anywhere, you know, I first kind of, you know, feel as a product owner that it's our due diligence and our jobs to dig into understanding what's driving these changes, right? You can't solve a problem without fully understanding what's driving. And to be honest, the real issues at hand also help us identify things that we need to do to solve the problems, right? Where there are gaps and how we can identify the right solutions to them. So we're going to talk about kind of three main categories that were driving agents, if you will, to what we saw happen over the last few years, flipping our proverbial worlds upside down. The first subject I want to talk a little bit about is the evolution of operations. Then I want to talk a little bit about technology changes that we're seeing. Again, you know, as a product owner here at Quest, part of my job is to spend a lot of my time researching changes in the industry so that we, as product development company, can ensure that our products are setting up our customers and our prospects for success, not only now, but as the IT landscape continues to change. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about the rise of cyber crime and security. This is something that's near and dear to everyone's heart. I don't think you can get through a day without some sort of cyber or security conversation within the IT industry. So I want to talk a little bit about the changes and the things that are bothering those that we talk to in the industry. And then I do want to take a little bit of time finally to explain a little bit about CASE, how we're solving. Hopefully the challenges and the things that we discussed before this will still be of interest to you, right? Regardless of what products you have currently adopted and how you, what challenges you're no doubt facing. But I do want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we're doing here specifically to help our customers and prospects solve these issues. So let's go ahead and get into kind of the evolution of operations. And, I think the thing that more times than not, when we talk to customers and why we research, it's really been this drastic change in, how and where people are working, right? If you think back pre-pandemic, really the reality was that most companies were largely, working in a office environment. That, inherently brought a lot of additional things along with it, such as the ability to go walk to someone when you have problems. You had some control of, what an employee is doing day to day, or at least more so than you may now. And you also had kind of that protection of your own corporate network. And so, one of the things that we've seen drastically change as it relates to operation and how people are working is, we during the pandemic found ourselves shifting primarily to 100% remote workforce. No doubt each and every one of you as technologists faced one of the things that really bothered everyone, which was, VPN connectivity that really wasn't designed to have the influx of consumers in which, overnight was required of you to support. So, this whole transition to the remote workforce world required us to kind of be on our toes. And again, I would be remiss if I don't take a moment out to address each and every one of you that, in many cases, IT teams really were kind of the unsung heroes during the pandemic. Not to take away from our medical staff that no doubt helped everyone through that, but from a business perspective, the IT teams were really relied on heavily to ensure that businesses went on, right? That companies didn't have to close down their shop. So, this real overnight change really changed the way we think as IT professionals. It had to, right? As I said, if we didn't change the way we thought or think, then we effectively were going to have to close up shop. And unfortunately, there were many companies that we saw during the last few years that closed their doors that were otherwise very successful. But now we find ourselves kind of entering this new realm, right? And this is one of those that is really one of the driving forces of why we need to ensure, that kind of everywhere endpoint management capability set. We're now being introduced to this idea of a hybrid workforce, one that we have to, and this is where buzzword bingo will come in a little bit, right? Remain agile as technologists. We need to make sure that we are capable of managing devices, regardless of whether that device finds itself within the four walls of your company, behind that corporate firewall, or if it's remote workforce, working from their home or cafe of their preference, right? We're really being challenged with a lot of new variables. And the fact is, it's evolving, right? And there really is a lot of proof behind that. If you think about kind of just the overarching growth of remote workforce or people working from home, it's actually been going on for quite some time now. If you look at kind of the 2021 analytics around kind of remote workforce, it was 60% nearly of the US workforce was transitioned to a remote role. Now, it depends on what analytics or what analyst you reference to get this value. I've seen some reports stating it was as upward of 80-90% because they limit it to specific industries. But regardless of the exact count, which doesn't really matter, again, it really was this stark contrast in a short period of time, right? But even before then, there was an adoption of remote workforce, right? It just nearly wasn't at the volume that we experienced the last couple of years. But this really has equated to this new kind of IT landscape. And if you couple this kind of transition to remote workforce or hybrid workforce uh, with that of kind of this evolving technology stack, it really allows us to have to take a new look at how we solve problems that otherwise wouldn't have really been on our priority list. And when I talk about that priority list, often the term, again, here's kind of your buzzword bingo of the slide, that digital transformation, right? That companies find themselves undergoing. One thing that we have learned here at Quest is that endpoint management, beyond maybe taking kind of your perpetual on-prem products and kind of cloudifying them, it really wasn't part of that digital transformation conversation on how to get these things to the cloud, how to be able to support your, hybrid workforce or your remote workforce. And that's really something that's drastically changed overnight. So, one of my goals in talking to customers such as yourselves and prospects is really helping them appreciate that what we may have been ignoring previously isn't something that we can continue to ignore. We really need to look at adopting some of the new technologies that these companies such as Microsoft, Apple are driving, and we'll dig into here in a second, to help us address this new reality, this new IT landscape. And as I mentioned, remote work or work locations, generally speaking, are still a moving target. I don't know about you, but I've heard many companies dictating, in news that everybody's going back to the office, right? And then there's some economic changes in the world. There's the cost of money, right, increasing, et cetera, et cetera. And quickly, companies that even had a strategy to go back to the office truly made a decision to pivot back to, a flexible work environment, or in some cases, went full circle and have gone to 100% remote workforce. So the fact is that we continue as technologists, and whether your strategy where you work today is to remain in the office or go back to the office or remain hybrid, who knows what's going to happen tomorrow, right? Leadership at our companies can make changes pretty quickly to this, and they expect you as IT professionals and kind of the unsung heroes of this event that occurred over the last couple of years to be capable to make those pivots overnight. And so, as you continue to think about supporting remote workers, we've done a lot of work in researching what are some of those biggest challenges that are keeping you up at night, right? And more than anything, one of these things that is almost always at the top of everyone's list is, just the drastic increase in cybercrime, right? And cybersecurity events, vulnerabilities are really in part being driven by the increase in remote workers, right? As well as the drastic inflection of device types that are also finding themselves on the internet, right? That aren't necessarily designed to be secure. I actually was reading an article, interesting enough, slightly off topic here the other day, that they're now looking at applying labels on devices, especially IoT devices for that matter, in order to state that that device, just like that energy certification we see on our appliances, are secure devices that have gone through some sort of security process, and that the vendor is deeming that device secure. And that's really in part because of this, right? The drastic increase of attacks, our attack surface is growing day and day, right? And we really can't keep up pace with that unless we get creative and start leveraging tools to help us kind of get ahead of that curve. Some of the other things that are also growing pains for companies is just kind of this, overwhelming infliction of having to support employees who, really have no idea what they're doing from a technology stack perspective, right? Perhaps you, like me, had experienced friends and family who were relying on, internet connectivity to be able to do their jobs, just not being able to even connect a new device to that network that they have at home, right? Because they haven't added a new device since their ATT, their charter company came in and installed and set it up for them, right? And so this overwhelmed many companies, right? Just yet again, adding to the growing list of things that you, as IT professionals, were faced with. And so, when you take kind of those operational changes and then you couple them with things that technology companies such as Quest are doing to help kind of adapt to that new reality, it just adds that much more to your kind of day in, day out list of challenges. You know, I brought this slide together because, one of the things that the pandemic really helped me to appreciate is that technology really is defined, or adoption of technology really is defined by our surroundings, right? Many of us probably knew what Teams was, especially being in the IT industry before the pandemic. But how many of us had really used Zoom? Maybe we heard about it, but we likely hadn't used it. Now, how many of us, if kind of asking for virtual hand raises, right, which we can't do, but I want you to think to yourself, how many of you now have grandparents or parents who have never touched a piece of technology before asking you to do Zoom with them, right? It really proves that the change in world conditions and the changes that surround each and every one of us drive technology adoption. And we can't ignore that. And if you think about Zoom and Teams, what did that leave many people going to do, right? Well, Logitech being one of those companies that happened to have, that webcam, that high def webcam, was able to profit from a world change that really no one expected, right? I don't know if you happen to try to acquire a high def camera during the pandemic or not. I know I was forced to. But there was wait times of 3 to 6 months to acquire these types of devices because of the sheer volume of people wanting to buy this to make sure that they looked as pretty as possible on these social media and these collaboration tools. So adoption of technologies again is driven by the change that surrounds us, and that wasn't all, right? Within the corporations, we saw companies go from having, desktop machines for every employee because, hey, again, it was a cheaper piece of equipment for them to own and manage. It wasn't quite as fragile, perhaps. And then overnight, they were forced to, roll out and throw away this equipment in order to acquire, mobile devices. Again, this kind of drives the fact that the types of devices and our ability to be agile in our management capabilities is something we have to do. It's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's not a choice. We have to adopt these new technologies and these new management methodologies to keep pace. And so one of my favorite sayings is that from the CEO of Microsoft. He really, I think, hit the nail on the head when he said, our industry doesn't respect tradition. It simply doesn't. It only respects innovation. And if you really think about that for a moment, some of the main vendors out there, being kind of Microsoft, Apple, and Google, really are thinking about innovation, and they don't care that we as consumers just maybe finished implementing or upgrading from let's call it, Windows 7, right? To Windows 8 to Windows 10 to now Windows 11. Hopefully, not too many of you spent too much effort adopting Windows 8, but the point is they don't care. They're going to move their technology forward. And one of the things that I'll tell you from a software perspective, relying on certain, kind of third party componentry to build our products, is the rate and pace at which companies are revving their products is at an all-time high, right? Let me say that again. The rate and pace at which companies are innovating and releasing new things is higher than ever before. And that's largely being driven by, the high increase of cyber crime, right? Security risks are basically forcing manufacturers, both hardware and software manufacturers, to ensure that they're providing as secure products as possible. And part of how they're doing that is by making drastic changes to their technology stacks. If I look at Microsoft, one of the things that they've really been doing is pushing this end of life event for on-prem virtualization. That's kind of that push and adoption to Azure. We're also seeing that even within their own kind of ELA agreements, trying to convince people that, hey, adopt things like Intune. That's a free product, and on paper it may be that way, or may be perceived that way, but under the covers there's lots of kind of prerequisites and cost to adopt these things, right? Just the change event itself is disruptive and makes you incur lots of cost. Apple, as it happens, probably is the trendsetter here. And they've done lots of things to basically show their hand that they are moving and forcing companies that have chose to adopt in the Apple technology stack to more of this kind of modern management methodology, right? And again, this was even before the pandemic. They were kind of leading people that direction. Apple is basically, doing things like keeping your ability to do network booting of devices, right? Ever since Big Sur, right, you could no longer image a device like we had historically done. And really, we see Microsoft following suit. Now, they don't own the hardware and the software in most cases, so it's not quite as aggressive. But again, there's millions of little mini indicators that myself and my team are recognizing that really help us to appreciate the need for our customers and our prospects to really begin wrapping their heads around this new norm, right? That these vendors are driving change that is going to dictate that they make drastic shifts in how they manage their endpoints and secure their environments. And Google, I'd be remiss if I didn't call them out, right? They too are making a lot of changes, even in just like basic technology frameworks, like how devices authenticate. I mentioned that we're seeing at a high rate and pace, higher than ever before, the end of life events of technology changes. Google's a perfect example of that. They've made some drastic changes to their kind of authentication framework that's going to leave companies and software products, kind of high and dry if they aren't keeping pace, so that the services and capabilities that you're relying on as consumers are going to break effectively if they don't adopt some of these new frameworks. So there's a lot happening here. And again, hopefully you can appreciate that, change and our surrounding variables do absolutely dictate how we in the IT industry have to respond. And one of the things that Microsoft and really all these companies are doing is really pushing people to, what Microsoft has coined the modern management methodology. I personally like to refer to it as like kind of this enrollment management methodology. I think it's a little more fitting for what it is they're doing. But ultimately, you think about what happened with our change of operations. What perfect timing it was of these vendors to have these kind of modern management or enrollment methodologies in place, allowing companies to do things like drop shipping a device because it's been enrolled in a autopilot program, or if Apple, what used to be called DEP, their Apple for Business Manager, and being able to ship these devices directly to our end users, and kind of skipping that need to bring devices to a centralized point to configure and manage them, right? And that's really something that we're seeing from a modern management methodology or enrollment based management methodology be one of the initial points of entries where companies are starting to adopt this technology and kind of this way of managing their endpoints, right? Because they can't necessarily justify having a location or assume that they're going to be able to bring all devices within the four walls of a company. Again, we saw this for sure when we had this drastic increase of devices that overnight had to be provisioned out to our consumers. And we'd be remiss if we don't also think a little bit about what's happened in the world as it relates to your bring your own device to the company technology stack. So the fact is there's lots going on, right? And all these things are just almost creating new attack vectors and new things that we have to be aware of in a world where cybercrime is already at a all-time high, as I've mentioned, right? Again, you talk to anybody within your company, right? Whether it's an executive assistant all the way down to, your security officers, and people are aware of this problem, right? They're aware that this is a reality that whether in business or in their home lives, they have to really be cautious, and they need to be on edge to ensure they don't fall victim. And some of the scary trends that you see as it relates to ransomware, and why we as companies need to really be thinking about how we're solving endpoint management, is that ransomware attack trends are, again, just very difficult to put your finger on. I actually remember, and the name slips my mind now, but I was at a security conference some time ago, and there was a speaker there that was talking about, their outside internet-facing services, and he kind of challenged everyone to go home and to write down a list of their top 20, servers that are externally accessible. And then, of that, he said, okay, of those, now go down and prioritize that list of 20 servers or services. And then, put them in order of uptime, or the time in which they're accessible, right, to the outside world. So maybe you just open a door for a little time here and there. And he said, of that top 20, any device that is on the internet for any given period of time, I can almost guarantee has been attacked and is, has some sort of vulnerability on it. And that really was impactful to me, because when I thought about, what we're facing with today, really no one is safe, right? Any service or any kind of, device is susceptible to attacks. Cyber criminals don't care what it is anymore. Any device, even a personal computer, has some form of value to cyber criminals. And social engineering remains very high as well as a point of entry. And again, if I kind of challenge you all to think about those devices that are now sitting on home networks, you don't have that extra layer of security that you've historically had to rely on being kind of your network perimeter, right? You're relying on those, let's call them default routers that come with their internet service providers that likely have never had their passwords changed, right? Fortunately, they've gotten better, and each device, newer device at least, has a different password than the next. But the fact is that we are being attacked from every angle possible. And we have to look at how we can, from an endpoint perspective, secure each and every one of these devices, right? We have to figure out how we can talk to them, how we can enforce compliance policies against them, regardless of where they sit. And this can't, be only for your top tier employees, right? Or, your kind of executives and above. It has to be at all spans, right? Because all business, all users are basically accessing the most important and vital piece of, business property that you have, which is data, right? It's not by mistake that we say data is king, because quite honestly, we live and breathe by the data in which our company relies on. And so, when you think about the different data breaches that have happened, especially the last year or so, the results are alarming, right? I won't read these, one after another, but the fact is the number of data breaches have dropped drastically. It's not, a small number here. We're seeing, almost 70% increase year over year in identity theft. My son actually worked at Best Buy as a geek for a while. And, it's funny how many times he saw people coming in due to the gift card scam that's going around, right? Time and time again, he had people coming in convinced that they had to buy gift cards because of, some sort of kind of attack against them, which was really just kind of a social engineering event. And again, that's at a small level. That's not even taking into account the companies or entities that have vast amount of data. They're the ones that are specifically an attack focus for cyber criminals. In fact, healthcare remains to be the primary source, or not a source, primary focus of cyber criminals. And that's because they are known to be such a great source of sensitive data, right? It has our medical histories, social security info, right? Kind of everything about us. If we've ever had to go to a doctor or a healthcare facility, they have it. So, they continue to be, a target for cyber criminals. And what's really, been a scary thing is how many companies have paid up in hopes to get back their data, yet they don't find themselves actually able to recover it all, right? So again, we can't just rely on a resilience plan. We have to look for ways in which we can proactively secure these devices in this new world. And that's, something, again, when we think about kind of our products and the things that we're releasing to market, it's really with all these things in mind, and how we're trying to prioritize feature functionality that we're bringing to market when there's so many great opportunities out there. It's really broken down vastly by, what is the security theme that we're able to solve with a given feature or function. And as we look at, kind of 2022, again, we talk about those kind of top 5 attack vectors that, we need to be mindful of. I kind of gave a few examples of different social engineering attacks that are happening. They're getting smarter and smarter. They're looking better and better. Where we used to be able to rely on, a typo to tell us whether it was, a fake email or a fake attempt to, get some information out of us or not. They're getting better, right? Their ability to make them look more realistic is at an all-time high. Couple that with remote working, and us not necessarily being able to go tap that person on the shoulder who's asking for information, right? Companies are basically creating forums where they're used to sharing more sensitive data in a digital way. And so, as you think about that, on top of, this increased attack surface, as we discussed a little bit earlier, the introduction of Internet of Things becoming more and more a reality, right? Mobile devices and the types of devices that we're now being asked to support is at all-time high. There's a lot to think about here in solving, this kind of endpoint anywhere pain. And hopefully, the things that I shared are things that you've been thinking about. If not, hopefully you'll walk away from today's conversation at minimum with some things that you need to think about when looking to implement, your next endpoint management solution, or your next kind of processes around endpoint management with your current tool set. Right? We can't just think about, the ability to push out software to an endpoint. We can't just think about the security of that device. We need to think about whether or not the technology or capabilities that we're leveraging today are truly going to be around tomorrow to continue to rely on. And the fact is, that the rate and pace, as we called out a couple times now, in which technology methodologies that endpoint management kind of practice owners, right, have been using, are starting to evolve and are going to dictate this kind of transition or pivot into new ways of solving these problems we've done for so long. So, as I mentioned, I'm a product owner here at Quest Software. And I oversee kind of two product lines. One's our data protection portfolio, but the other one's our case product portfolio. And, one of the things we like to share when talking to prospects and just customers or, IT experts is a little bit about, the fact that we've been around for quite a while. Hopefully you've heard of Case before. If not, you will as of today. So, Case has been around for a long time. We were founded in 2003, and we actually been built off of kind of this idea of trying to solve endpoint management, similar to what the TiVo did for media back in the day. That's what our founders based kind of our product initially off of, was this idea of kind of giving an easy user interface to solving kind of complex problems, similar to the TiVo. And so, one of the things or flagship capabilities that we have focused on for a really long time here at Case is, patching, and the need to solve patching and to secure endpoints proactively. And so that continues to be one of our focus areas today, right? Offering a broad set of both OS and third-party patches for kind of the whole breadth of operating systems that are out there, everything from Windows to Mac to, Linux. We continue to make sure that we have solutions for that. And, trying to keep pace with what's happening in the world, we too, like some of our competitors out there, I saw, a question earlier, is Case cloud, or is Case, ultimately another MDM solution? We obviously too, like many of our competitors, have a cloud-based MDM solution. We have kind of moved away from this idea of calling it MDM because MDM makes you think kind of mobile device management, and it's not that anymore, right? It really is kind of this new management methodology, which applies to both kind of your mobile devices, but really just, workstation OSs in general. And so, we continue to kind of innovate and look at ways to solve, new problems, both with our kind of traditional on-prem products, but also, have been putting a lot of focus on our cloud initiatives and solving endpoint management in different ways. And one of the things we're really excited about is our Case Cloud Secure product, which hasn't even hit market yet, but we have that in a beta form, where we're going to really start kind of pushing the envelope on what our abilities are from a kind of modern or enrollment-based management solution is around solving the problem of security and securing those endpoints and really differentiating ourselves from many of the competitors with the introduction of that product or add-on to our cloud platform. And so, we have a large product portfolio here at Case. As I mentioned, it's not just our Case Cloud product. We've been doing UEM and kind of this hybrid framework for quite some time now, having our flagship product being initially built off of the concept of an appliance, right? Kind of this lift and shift thing that during our Dell days was actually ran and sold as piece of a hardware. We evolved to kind of that virtual framework to provide the agility to run it in the cloud and expose it to the outside world if need be. But since then, we're realizing quickly that because of all the problems that we're faced with, we have to also introduce kind of this enrollment-based framework, if for no other reason today, but to help solve kind of our device provisioning struggles and challenges. So again, if you as a consumer don't already, take advantage of programs like Autopilot or Apple Business Manager, also, again, previously referred to as DEP. I'm going to encourage each and everyone to really make that a priority, right? Again, hopefully all the things we talked about as it relates to, the rise in cybercrime, the kind of innovation changes that are being forced upon us by those, market leaders, Microsoft, Apple, Google. And then, the reality of our kind of new norm from an operational perspective is going to dictate that, we have these things, this modern management kind of capability in our arsenal, right? Because otherwise, I really would be fearful on our ability to survive another kind of, drastic event like we had experienced the last few years. And so for us here at Case, that really is kind of our Case Cloud initiative and product, this cloud-based platform that is kind of acting as the foundation for our modern management capabilities, which again is very easily coupled with kind of that on-prem or that kind of UEM framework to solve endpoint management end to end. But, like I said, today my goal is, if nothing else, just to educate the teams here on the line to really take a look and spend the time necessary to understand what modern management does and why it's of value to you, or enrollment-based management. When we think about kind of designing a solution, when we decided we were going to get into this, business, it's been now 4 or 5 years ago. We made the decision that we needed kind of deem 3 key design principles, which, when I look back, stand true today, right? Everything we talked about earlier in today's conversation really just solidifies or creates validity to these main principles that we kind of base the design of our solution on. And it's first and foremost that, today you have to take kind of this cloud-based identity approach. Security starts with the identity, right? The ability to know what or who or how something should apply isn't just device-centric anymore. It has to also account for the user that's logged into that device. And especially as you think about, BYOD initiatives, this is more and more important than ever before. And so, that was kind of a key capability to say, okay, hey, we're going to use that as the basis for making decisions. The other design principle that, we took was really this assumption, and this is really a common one across, most modern management or enrollment-based management products, is that you have to assume that the network that device is operating on isn't secure, right? So, that's something to kind of really consider when trying to solve this anywhere endpoint management problem that we have. We have to just assume, you know what, devices aren't going to connect in on a VPN. I'm not going to be able to control what network they're sitting on. I can't control what internet connectivity they're using, 24/7. It really requires that, you just make this assumption. And that's one we've really leaned into. And as we continue to broaden kind of our capability set on our Case Cloud platform with the introduction of our secure capabilities that are coming down the pipe, this is going to really allow us to affect those devices in a real positive way, because we don't rely on any kind of these standard variables of a secure network. And then lastly, it kind of all couples into this, is that, devices are going to be all over the place, right? And one of the things that's very nice as it relates to kind of this, enrollment management methodology and this kind of modern initiative of how to manage endpoints, is that you don't care where a device is. It doesn't matter where it's at, because at the end of the day, we have a hook into that device as soon as it's powered on and gets an internet connection. Even as early as, the out-of-box experience using programs like Autopilot, right? We don't care whether or not we had a corporate image on it or not. We've owned that device before it even was shipped from the manufacturer. So, these are three design principles that, again, as you all look to solve or kind of begin, if you haven't already, your, for lack of a better term, digital transformation into kind of the new way of managing endpoints. These are three principles that I would highly encourage each and every one of you to ensure that your product of choice, and hopefully that would be Case as part of that conversation, really has as a basis of its design. And so, how we solve that, if you think kind of about bringing all those things together, one of the inherent advantages of adopting a framework like this is what we kind of call our perpetual enforcement capability. What that means is, likely you on the line that haven't adopted this method or this kind of way of management yet, you're likely used to doing things like running a schedule to solve a patch need, right? Running a schedule to make sure that latest software title or that software package was deployed, right? You're kind of reliant on this invoked event that you as sysadmins, if you're one of those on the line, have kind of set up and told to run. Well, as you think about kind of modern management and this transition, one of the key benefits of it, especially with all these challenges in mind that we've talked about, is that you actually kind of, set your job up, and the devices are always validating themselves against that compliant state, right? You don't have to set up a job, in other words, to ensure that software title was deployed. It's simply a matter of applying a policy to a device, right? Especially here at Case, how we've designed our solution set. And just that action of, setting up a policy and applying it to a device triggers a compliance check, right? So again, this idea of having to, think about maintenance windows or triggering a job at a very finite time, goes completely out the window. It allows us to more proactively address the vulnerabilities within our environment. It allows us to more proactively ensure that we are up revving, software that is dictated to be on all those devices. And again, it's not just limited to at a device level, but hopefully it's also kind of applying in consideration of the user and what that user needs in order to do their job effectively. And so, that's something that we wanted to make sure we offer up to all attendees today, is an opportunity to, take a look at what we have to offer here with a 14-day trial of Case Cloud. As I mentioned, we do have some very unique security themed capabilities coming to market here in the coming months that we have available to beta. So, if you're interested in learning more around that and seeing it, I can't go into necessarily greater detail here, but sign up for this trial, and that'll allow us to have some more uh, formal conversations with you about what we're going to be doing to really allow our way of solving kind of anywhere management in a security minded way, right? And provide you all with some very unique capabilities that really are otherwise not available to market. And so, we're really excited about that. Again, I wish we had them already out the door where I could talk to them in greater detail. But hopefully, you've seen that today based on our conversation. We spend a lot of time thinking about what's happening in the market and what's happening. And we're trying to ensure that, Case continues to be one of those trusted companies because, we are not just resting on our laurels. We're ensuring that we're developing products that is effective for today's problems and challenges. So, I've seen lots of great questions in here. Perhaps you can call out some of the ones that you thought would be of most interest to everybody, Scott.
Yeah, sounds good. And Ken, I just have to say, I'm one of those people who was raising a hand when you were asking about older parents, asking, to meet on Zoom for the first time. But you really captured the speed that things are moving at, like as far as Microsoft and Apple and Google just, pushing out software updates at such a pace now. It's really a different environment than it was even a few years ago managing endpoints. Yeah, so we do have a lot of questions here. It's hard to pick through them. There's so many, but we'll start with one from Jonathan. And Jonathan's wondering, does Case have the ability to check device compliance based on custom policies? Are we able to implement automation remediation with the platform in case of a breach of compliance?
Yeah, hopefully I started to answer that in my last statement. So, especially as it relates to kind of our cloud platform initiatives and our way of solving enrollment-based management, right? It is 100% kind of policy driven. So, it's not just limited to, a predefined set of policies that we have built, right? You as a consumer quite literally have the ability to go in there, create what compliance looks like for you as a company, and then apply that to either all devices or subsets of devices to ensure that we are, again, to kind of take that term that we've coined, perpetually enforcing it to ensure that that device remains compliant. So yeah, absolutely great question, and hopefully you'll check out what we have to offer on that.
Okay, super. We have another one here. How does Quest Case offering differentiate itself from the multitude of vendors in this space?
So, look, it is something that lots of companies are, out there trying to solve. So I'm not gonna, sit here and say that, there aren't other great products out there. There are, right? And I administered many of them back in the day as they've continued to evolve. One of the biggest things that I'll say is, as we look at kind of this modern methodology, because we are taking such a security kind of focus on what problems we're wanting to solve and why we're wanting to solve things a certain way. I do believe here in the coming months, especially as we release some of that security capability I teased out, you're going to see us kind of separate from much of the field. We feel like it's important to continue to provide consumers, and this is what I will say, levels of granularity as it relates to, their compliance state and securing those endpoints, right? Not just relying on, things like built-in Windows updates as an example and saying that must be good enough. Or, one of the new things that Intune has launched is auto patch, a great technology that's meant to simplify the management of patching, but really does nothing in the way of solving things like third party application patching or giving you the ability to kind of do what we've traditionally done, which is kind of managing what patches should be deployed, right? Putting lots of trust in the vendor. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I always we had a user event a couple weeks ago, and I polled the audience. There was a few hundred people in the audience. I said, who here trusts every patch that, let's use Microsoft as an example, releases? Raise your hand. And literally not one person raised their hand. And so as you think about a lot of those other competitors, when I talk about how we separate ourselves, we take this approach that we try to simplify things, but don't necessarily put all trust and faith in these vendors to always do what's right for us, because they don't know the multitude of variables that we have in our environment. So that's one of the biggest differences that I think you would see if you dig into our technologies.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I guess that's a category of watch this space as well with the new release that's coming out this quarter.
Absolutely.
So yeah. So the next question is the Case UEM platform able to pull syslogs and audit events from endpoints in case they're needed by a SIM for event correlations or for alerting?
Yeah, so our products do integrate with SIM tools, right? So if you want to push some information about the actual product itself, and then the information that we ultimately gather, about a device, especially if you think about kind of our hybrid solution set that still does rely on some variation of an agent to feed additional data. All that information is is capable of being pulled into external tools, whether it be through kind of RESTful APIs, database queries, et cetera, et cetera. We absolutely give companies multiple ways in which they can get data out to feed into their security decisions that they're making day in and day out, or observations even, right, of what they do.
Okay. Well, Kent, I know you've got places to be and things to do, and unfortunately, we've got a ton of questions here. We probably had 24 or more come through, so we'll get those questions to you, so you and the team can get back to people. But
Please do.
just
We'll make sure we do so. I promise to get back with everybody. Yeah.
excellent. Really appreciate that. And just sort of as a final note, you did have this slide up previously. Just a quick reminder to people if they do want to get started with Quest, best steps for them to take.
Yeah, please do. And inherently, if you sign up for the trial, one of my sales engineering staff members will reach out. So that's another great way to get your questions answered that you have posted here. If it wasn't just for the $50 gift card, which hopefully it wasn't.
Yeah, I think it clearly was not. Okay, well, Kent, thank you so much for being here today and bringing us up to speed on Quest Case.
Thanks for.
All right, and before we wrap up, we have one more piece of business. It's the $300 Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of that card is Aaron Sampat from California. So congratulations to Aaron. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Quest for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending and for all of your great questions. That concludes today's event.